Yes, they said, well, we can't go. And I said, why not? Because Ottawa then will know that we were here for this event. And that wouldn't be good for either our business or careers. So there we go. In any event, I'm one of the speakers here. My job is just to call everybody together and introduce you to Adrienne Batra. She is the editor-in-chief of the Toronto Sun. And she, before she went to print, she was a broadcaster and been in politics. And one of the stellar reasons why she was chosen to chair this tonight is because she was a tank commander in the Canadian Army. And you do not fool around with a tank commander. So people are encouraged to speak, but bear in mind who's in charge. Adrienne.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. I'm not sure what it says about us that you needed a token conservative to come and moderate this debate, but nonetheless, it's my pleasure and my honor to be here because I am very interested personally to hear from this stellar panel who I just learned collectively have 150 years of service to the Liberal Party of Canada. So there's a lot to be learned. I want to just very quickly lay out sort of our rules of engagement. It's not going to be super formal, but we are going to have some semblance of structure, unlike the current Liberal Party of Canada. We're going to have some structure here tonight. So our resolution is, be it resolved that the Liberal Party is dead. And for the yeas, we have Dan McTeague, who's a long-serving Liberal MP for 19 years, and Mark Keeley, who's the former chief assistant to the late Right Honourable John Turner. For the nays, we have Jack Siegel, noted Liberal lawyer. That was on my note card to write. That's very important. It's pretty cool. It's kind of like Cher. And of course, Mr. Stephen LeDrew, former broadcaster, former president of the Liberal Party of Canada, and of course the host of the LeDrew 3-minute interview. I am Adrienne Batra. I am the editor-in-chief of the Toronto Sun, and I am going to really lay this out very quickly. Each person from both sides will have 3 minutes as their introduction, and then we're going to have short rebuttals, and then we're going to open it to you. So be prepared with your questions, all those things that you feel you've always wanted to ask any one of these four who have been around the party for a very, very long time. And then we will conclude. I do, of course, have some questions of my own, just in case if this crowd is shy. I know Catherine is not, so I look forward to this. So again, with the resolution, be it resolved that the Liberal Party is dead, we will begin with the ayes, and Mr. Dan McTeague.
Adrienne, thank you very much for that introduction, but most importantly, thank you for being here this evening, everyone. Stephen and I had a discussion on one of his 3-minute segments in which we began the whole process of understanding where the parties are in the great firmament of politics in Canada, and we determined that, at least I determined, that I think it's time to say what many people have been afraid to say for some time, and that's, I think, the Liberal Party as we know it. That's important. Is over. It's finished. It's dead. Now, of course, that will become as a shock to many, including my own self, which I'm wrestling with because, of course, I have spent nothing but the past 40, 50 years in the Liberal Party. Mine, not as long as Jack Siegel, my good friend, or maybe even Mark Keeley, or even for that matter, you don't know how old you are, so we're not going to guess how many years you've been in the party. Antiquated. But I am here not to say the death of the Liberal Party, but to say that the Liberal Party, as we understand it, is transforming. And it's transforming to a very different organization than the one which I grew up with, the one I understood, and the one I served for 18, 19 years as a member of Parliament in the House of Commons. Rather than being a party that espouses the idea of the positive nature of the state as a means of improving human conditions, improving social security, as a means of empowering freedoms, the Liberal Party, I think, has become anything anathema of the very thing it used to become. It used to be. It used to be a party of the centre, where it could balance certain on many issues and find that very famous word. My good friend Howard Brown from many years ago, remember the word, we actually had a thing called consensus in the Liberal Party, where we thought and struck out to try to find the common elements that kept this country together. We're a party, a regional party, for which many of our regional organizations are in disarray. In the western part of this country, it's not uncommon, this is what we've seen in the past. We now see British Columbia. We are now seeing evidence of the demise of the party in many respects, and it won't come back because of the cult of personality. You get a whiz-bang person who has, great hair, great selfies, or whatever the case may be. You're not going to win the minds and hearts of Canadians who now feel that after several years, the country has taken a turn for the worse. And it will not be acceptable to simply say, well, this is happening globally, therefore it has to happen to Canada. No. The Liberal Party bases itself on a tradition of finding the common element that unites us and bonds us together, looking out for each other, trying to find how we get that common sense to Canadians to be able to provide opportunities for them so that we can avoid some of the pitfalls that we avoided in the past. I belonged to a government in 1993 to 2006 that was able to build and construct a financial situation that prevented us from having the chaos that many parts of the world saw in 2008 when we saw the global recession. Canada weathered it extraordinarily well because of some of the fiscal prudence and measures that we took, very difficult as they were in the 1990s. That realpolitik, that idea of making sure that we could respond effectively and practically to things and issues that came up meant that we had to have a skilled bureaucracy. We also had to have good policies that were able to anticipate as well as build and defend the country to the extent possible. We seem to have lost that because we have lost our ways. We have taken upon ourselves the positions of accepting things like censorship. We've accepted the idea that certain forms of freedoms in this country are interchangeable. They're trade-offable. It brings us back to the dangers that we saw in 1970. Yes, when Jack was just a young buck back in those days. At the end of the day, the Liberal Party as we know it is not going to continue. It will be a party very much of the hard left. Thank you, everybody.
And our first speaker from the no side, Mr. Jack Siegel. You have 3 minutes.
It's a bit of a switch from what I thought the proposition was today, but we'll run with it. The first thought that crossed my mind when Stephen suggested that the Liberal Party is dead is something of a conversation piece was perhaps cliched, but Mark Twain came to mind that the reports of my death are an exaggeration. The Liberal Party isn't going anywhere. We have had...
Did you just say it's not going anywhere?
It's not going anywhere from where it is. Well, maybe in the short term, because I'm not talking about what's going to happen in the next election. I don't think that's what we're here about.
We got 3 minutes, Stephen.
Yeah, exactly. Quit interrupting. What we have is a party that has gone through what's a relatively typical cycle of 10 years in government, successful government with a record that I'm really pleased to have contributed to making happen. 69 of the last 100 years in Canada have been Liberal governments, and Mike Pearson was different from Pierre Trudeau, and Pierre Trudeau was different from John Turner, and John Turner was different from Jean Chrétien, and so on with Martin, and then Trudeau II. We of course evolve. We are always going to evolve. We're doing things differently in so many ways. Under Trudeau, we've made the party more open. He likes to call it a movement. I prefer calling it a party. I like to think of myself as a member of it, but constitutionally speaking, and that's kind of my hack, I am now a registered Liberal, and that's okay. But we are united in a progressive view of what Canada is. The party has a bandwidth that it moves around in over the years from left to right. Pearson with a little nudge in minority government from the NDP, and that's not a bad thing. Certainly introduced some good ideas like healthcare and CPP. And under the current Trudeau government, we've seen terrific advances as well. There's a lot of them, in fact. Things like $10 a day child care, pharmacare. Yes, a push from the NDP, but the best governments are dialogues. And to my mind, the Liberal Party is the only party, and it's going to continue to be the only party that can actually hear from the broad spectrum of Canadian society and then move forward. Not necessarily always with a consensus, as Dan would put it. Some ideas are harder to advance than others, but with commitment and principle. And whether this government is still in place 4 years from now, I'd like to be more optimistic than I am this evening, but that could change in a matter of months as well. I think the best direction to take, and certainly the place I'm going to be staying for the foreseeable future, i.e. the rest of my lifetime, is going to be backing this party as the best basis for advancing Canada.
Thank you very much. And for the ayes again, Mr. Mark Keeley.
You know, I want to thank everybody for being here. This is wonderful that we've done this. And look, I met Howard Brown in 1977. I can't believe it. I was 16 years old, and I was involved in the Liberal Party because it gave me a meaningful choice. I say this because when you're in a party, and the reason why I think that the Liberal Party is dead is because right now, here we are in a situation where this party is personality driven. Now, when you think about that in the context of where we're at right now, sure, the party was personality driven throughout World War II with Mackenzie King. This guy, personality driven, a wonderful head of this party. But I don't care about government. I think about the party as a structure. The question is the Liberal Party dead? As we know it today, yes, it is, and I'm going to tell you why. There is no fundamental approach for meaningful choice for those who wish to be a card-carrying member of this party. In 2014, I think you should all take this into your thought process. The current leader of the Liberal Party said, this is no longer a party, this is a movement. And when we talk about a movement, he says, you could, as long as you voted Liberal, you could be part of this movement, which is no longer a party. When you have a party, you have a structure. When you have a structure, you have the ability to influence policy. There's no influencing of policy and availability for that right now that is incumbent on anybody who carries a card in the Liberal Party, which does not exist. So if you could use an analogy, what I think this current cast of characters did was have the little fife and drum, carried all the Liberals who were like me into a room, locked the door, and that's where we're at. So the Liberal Party as we know it today, much like my colleague Dan McTague said, whom I've known for a long, long time, and Jack I've known for a long, long time, and Stephen I've known for a long, long time, have said that this party really, as it stands right now, no longer exists like we knew it back in the days of 1984. It's no secret. Everybody who knows me knows that John Turner and I have been very, very close. From 1984 to 1990, John Turner built this party. He built this party to hand it off to Jean Chrétien in 1990, who became not only the leader of the party, but the prime minister based on the work that John Turner did for the party for 6 years. And this is lost, it's gone. And so I think ostensibly we're at a terrible situation right now where the brand, the best brand on planet Earth for politics is no longer viable, no longer in existence. So look, I hope I've gone earlier than my colleagues, but the Liberal Party as we know it is dead.
And finally, Mr. Stephen LeDrew for the noes.
Thank you, Adrian. I'm going to just pick up where Mark left off. He says the most popular brand on the planet. The Liberal Party is still that brand. It's the most successful party in the democratic Western world ever. I gave that speech lots 25 years ago. It is the most successful party, and there are millions and millions of Canadians who consider themselves liberals. Fiscally conservative, socially progressive. They are not socialists. They are not in favor of a government that brings in things like the Online Harm Act, which has a bunch of bureaucrats going to review everything that goes online. It is not autocratic. And so the party is not dead. Let's just put this, it's been hijacked for the last 10 years. It was hijacked by none other than Justin Trudeau. He is the leader. He is the Prime Minister. Were there an election tomorrow or the next day, he would be out very, very fast. But the party is like the phoenix. It's going to rebuild, and it will not be rebuilt in the way that Trudeau has run the government. The government's one thing, and as Mark said, the party is another thing. The party used to be a strong institution. Trudeau got away with, or gave away with the Constitution. There's no recall for a leader. There are riding associations limited to 10 people. People in the Prime Minister's office are now picking candidates for Liberals, which never happened before. It is a very, very different operation than it used to be when it was a strong party. I know this, I have the scars on my back where the party can sometimes take the leader to task if he's not following the Constitution, and that leader will be gone, even if he's Prime Minister. That doesn't happen anymore. There is no control on this Prime Minister, which is why, in my view, we have a socialist, regressive government in power that most Canadians, the reason why most Canadians are against this government is because it's not Liberal. So he is the Liberal Party leader, no question about that. But the party has no role any longer. But it's still there. It's still there in the sense that, as I said at the outset, there are millions and millions of Canadians who consider themselves Liberal. Will they be voting Liberal in the next election? Not a chance, because they don't consider this government to be Liberal. It is oppressive. It is run from the top down and is not responsive. As Trudeau says, I'm out there working for Canadians to make it like he wants it. But that's not Liberal. So I'm against the resolution. The Liberal Party is not dead. Like the phoenix, it's going to rise again, but it's going to take an election or two, or maybe three, before the millions of people in Canada who would vote Liberal say, we are members of the Liberal Party again. We just have to resurrect it.
Thank you very much. There we go. That's better. Thank you to all four of you. So as we have given them each an opportunity to lay out their introduction, their opening salvo, so to speak, I would like to give an opportunity to each of the four to take 2 minutes to rebut something they had heard from the other side, and we're going to begin with how we started at the outset. Dan McTague, you are up first.
I thank you for that, Adrian. Stephen, I am with you on the idea that there can be a movement, or there can be an opportunity down the road for the party to resurrect. I just don't believe that the party, given the current rigidity of the leadership, in which is top-down, in which you have, admittedly, riding associations which are virtually defunct. Now I'll let Jack speak to that because he would know the riding associations better than I would. But for whom the finances are in horrible shape, and for which exist only because the staff of members of Parliament actually represent and run them. So it's important, I think, to understand that the reason, if there's going to be any rising of the party from the ashes, it is going to be a very different party than one we know. Justin Trudeau has not permitted any new people to rise, as I've seen in the past, where we have had alternative leaders that have come out as good ministers or as good backbenchers. That may very well happen through a nomination and through a leadership process, but as it stands, it has been singularly all about Justin Trudeau and nothing but Justin Trudeau, and as a result, he's committed the country to a perception that it is a left-wing organization, very much committed to socialism, and that is a very dangerous recipe for the understanding and the dynamic of the Liberal Party, which is based on freedoms and on individuals, not on the idea of principles of dogma. Sorry.
Thank you. Jack, I'd like to give you the opportunity to either respond directly or make a separate point.
Actually, I'm not going to entirely resist the urge to rebut my...
Oh, just, yeah, there, hit the red button.
Okay. There you go. Yeah, really, 3 on 1. Now, I'm going to fail at resisting the urge to rebut my teammate here, but well, I'll start with the general nature of this doom and gloom scenario because of who the leader is. We keep having dominant leaders. Somebody else, has already acknowledged that point. Are there strong ministers in this cabinet who are in a position to succeed him? Yeah, sure. I'm a little concerned in terms of reaction because of the hostility that has developed to Trudeau as to Chrystia Freeland's political fate. But is she a capable person to lead the party? Oh, absolutely. Is Anita Anand? Absolutely. I always bugger up his first name, so I'll just call him Champagne. Terrific guy, smart as a whip, absolutely capable. Move outside the box a little. I've heard one or two references in the last month to Christy Clark, who is the Premier of BC. If she wants to step in, she used to be the director of the Young Liberals of Canada. It's not like she's not a lifer like everybody on this stage. There are lots of people who can step up to the job, and quite frankly, if you go back 3-4 years prior to Harper's election, who the hell thought of him as a possible prime minister? The fact is that prime ministers tend to last 8 to 10 years in this country. We're reaching the end of that cycle, and the party may lose. Current poll that I saw today had us at about 70-something seats, which is bloody awful. But where was it? John Turner got out of his first election. Sorry, Mark. It was 40 seats.
Well, like that was his fault.
Well, no. I just don't want to rub salt in the wound, but the numbers. Diefenbaker routed Pearson, 48 seats. These things happen, parties bounce back. What I don't want to see, and this may be an argument for Trudeau to stay, is him doing to the party what Brian Mulroney did to his. Kim Campbell took his bullet. If it's going to be that bad, maybe he stays and suffers these slings and arrows himself rather than inflicting that on somebody whose political career is going to end on the spot. And then returning to Stephen. He talked about no recall of the leader. That rule came in under Paul Martin. Talked about appointing candidates. That rule came in under Jean Chrétien. It's got nothing to do with Trudeau. Trudeau, until a by-election in 2020 or 2021, I should know, it was my riding, never appointed a single candidate. And if you're going to respond on the notion of, oh, well, they just make the nominations happen, let's talk about the entire 1980s.
Well, I don't think we have time to do that, but nonetheless, Mr. Keeley, you have a couple of minutes to respond.
Well,
pretty much say whatever the hell you want at this
right.
point.
I'm not gonna take 8 minutes like Jack did to do my 2-minute rebuttal. But I got to say this. No, but Jack, I love you. I've known you since I was 16 years old. We're both in our 60s now. I can say this. It's typical. It's very typical of somebody who is in the current Liberal Party to think that all of the Liberal Party politics evolves around those who are elected. And that's my issue is no. We have a party, we have a structure. The House of Commons, the 338 members of Parliament are not representative of they don't rule their parties. They represent their parties who have a structure that, in my opinion, right now for the Liberal Party does not exist. And let me give you a couple of classic examples. We have a by-election right now in Montreal, in the Salimar, where the candidate was appointed by the Prime Minister's office. That would never have happened if the Liberal Party was strong. We would have a process right now, ladies and gentlemen, where we know the current leader of the Liberal Party is at horrible numbers, and there are two aspects to recall a leader. One is through the party structure, which does not exist right now, and the second would be for caucus, all of whom are scared out of their wits to say anything lest they be canceled by the current Prime Minister's office. That is not a party. That is an oppressive autocracy, and that's where we're at right now. So I fundamentally think that as long as we are personality driven, and I'll give you this as a very tangible example. My member of Parliament prior to the last federal election was a wonderful guy by the name of Sven Spengeman. And I called Sven and I said, Sven, do not put Justin Trudeau on your sign. Oh, we're not going to. We think that we can move forward with the Liberal Party as a brand. Everything's great. Okay, great. I said, Sven, can I get a sign on my lawn? I got a sign on my lawn, Team Trudeau. So I called him, I said, Sven, why does it say Team Trudeau? Well, because we were told by the PMO, not the Liberal Party, by the PMO, that it needs to be Team Trudeau. That is not a Liberal Party, Jack. Stephen, I should say this, your chair should be over here. I've seen you on LeDrew Live. I've seen you on 3 Minutes LeDrew. You couldn't give a rat's ass about the current Liberal Party. You should be over here on this side.
Okay, Stephen. All right.
Madam Chair?
You can't let that go unanswered.
Thank you very much.
You have your 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes.
I'm going to point out and use as evidence what Jack just said. When he said, when Trudeau goes, there are a number of ministers, and there may be other people who are not ministers, who can take over. And when the cult of personality is over, there will be Liberals who realize that in order to win an election, they're going to need riding associations. They're going to need people going out canvassing. They're going to need people picking a candidate from within the riding who will get out there and hold up the Liberal flag. There will be a rebuilding of the party. You don't rebuild something that's dead. It's not dead. It's just, as I said, there's a hiatus, and it's because of the cult of personality of Trudeau, who runs everything along with the rest of the PMO. There's no cabinet that does anything right now. There is certainly no party that does anything right now. And so the party is not dead, as I said in my outset. Jack, and I know you'll agree with me on this, repeat after me. There are millions of Canadians who will vote Liberal once Trudeau is gone.
They'll be voting that way even if he stays.
Actually, you know what? Actually,
Not maybe millions, but there will be millions.
there will be some, but Paul Martin found out that a lot of Liberals, if they don't like what's going on, they won't vote. And they'll come back and vote afterwards. So I am supporting you in this. The Liberal Party will come back. It will be created. It will have what the eyes say. It will have structure. It will have process. It will have a better constitution. And it will have people who volunteer for years and years and years to have a middle party which is reasonable and which has a socially progressive outlook and an economic conservative point of view that gets this country going, got us where we were 10 years ago, and not in debt up to the keister now.
Okay, so we were originally just going to start opening it up to the floor, but I have a sense and a feeling that all four of these gentlemen would like to say a few more things. So I just want to give you an opportunity to have a little bit of open discussion. We'll start with the ayes and at least have some semblance of order there. But then for all of you, there will be a microphone that is going to be around on the floor. I've seen a lot of your faces nodding and disagreeing, so let's have some questions from you. I too have questions as well, but I will, I'd like to give an opportunity to either Dan or Mark to have some open discussion right now.
Go ahead.
I just think that this has been extraordinarily revealing. The one thing that is missing in all of this that suggests why the Liberal Party is going to have a hard time reconstituting itself after this particular period is that the Conservative Party is quite prepared to take up the space that we as Liberals have vacated in the center of the political spectrum. And believe me, people don't want to be right, they don't want to be left, they don't want to be pigeonholed, they don't want to be seen as regional. A real Liberal is going to identify with that party, with that organization. They may not even be considering themselves as Conservatives. The danger we face right now is not how well we re-equip ourselves after the leadership. It is likely that the Conservatives could very well take up the vacuum. That should be the concern of all of us here, and it definitely augurs in favor of saying the Liberal Party is likely dead.
Jack or Stephen?
Okay, to first respond to Dan, I see no sign of conservative moderation. I don't know where that's coming from. I see right-wing policies that make my make my skin tingle in fear, but it might be the most optimistic thing I've heard all day. If they're not going to be as bad as I expect them to be, that will be a good thing. But this group of people do not strike me as the kind of people who are going to take Canada forward in any kind of socially progressive manner. They've still got a bunch of fanatical anti-abortion people crawling around looking for, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to direct that your way. So I was looking right at you. But I know you are. But there's a difference between having a point of view and trying to make it part of the government agenda. And there are plenty of people, including one or two very likely cabinet ministers, on that side of it. So I just don't see where you get that from. And in terms of autocracy in the political party, I think it was 1987. Dan, you and I were on the same side of this one. In the post-Meech Lake era. I got a call from the leader's office. I was a riding president at the time. I got a call from the leader's office saying, keep saying these things and getting your name in the paper and you'll never see the inside of a Liberal Party room again. I'll save the name. It wasn't you, Mark. But it's happened throughout. People push their weight around and it's never the leader. It's people who say they speak in the leader's name. It's not a helpful thing, but it's a reality, and it happens on all sides in all governments and in all parties, even when they're in opposition, as the example I gave.
Mark?
Yeah, there was a book written in the latter part of the 70s called Grits. I don't know if anybody saw that or read that book. Yes, right, Christina McCall Newman. And in that book, it's very interesting because she for all intents and purposes, excoriates a fellow by the name of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, talking about how he co-opted the party. There was no machine that gave anybody any opportunity to have any meaningful dialogue with the brand that was propping up its elected officials. Enter 1984. I was very much involved in the 84 election, as were everybody on this dais and my good friend Howard Brown and others in this room. And for 6 years, John Turner, and I'm only saying this because for 6 years, John Turner said, we have to do this to engage with Canadians across this country so that they could see the viability of this party, and that would turn into seats. Over the last, I'm just going to say 10 years, we have seen a marked decrease in the opportunity for anybody who's Canadian, who has an opportunity to want to get involved in political politics, to have a say in how meaningful policy is put in position or put in place in a particular party. We have not seen this. Everything is done out of the Prime Minister's office, much like what happened in this current government's previous life, where his father was the Prime Minister from 68 to 84. So I'm just saying to you, we don't have a machine. There's not an opportunity for Canadians to have meaningful opportunity to get involved in policy or the kinds of things that get them involved in the future, the aspirations of this country. And we don't see that in the House of Commons. We see a bunch of, I'm sorry to sound like this, but we see a bunch of people who are afraid to say anything, much like, I'm sorry to say this, Dan and I, who probably said, you say anything negative, Keeley, you say anything negative, McTagg, nothing's going to happen to you. I'm just going to say this last point. When you are a political party, and when you aspire to be elected, you want to have people who are of like mind. At this particular juncture right now, we have abrogated that because it's not the current system's process to do that, where you have, we said, and this is a very classic example, in the early 2015s, they took away the opportunity to put patronage in place, a like-mindedness, to have them, for all intents and purposes, to be, however you want to call it, inoffensive or non-liberal or non-aligned. And that's where the problem starts. And that's not the Liberal Party, and that's not the way that this country ought to be run if we're running it from the perspective of a Liberal Party. So I'm conscious of this fact, and I'm conscious of the fact that right now that doesn't exist.
Stephen LeDrew, before we open it up to the floor, would you like to speak about any of that?
Well, I do, and I've been thinking seriously about what my three friends have said, and nobody can deny that this government is unpopular. And there'll be various reasons. Journalists say, well, it's because he's been in power for 9 years, everybody's tired of him. Others would argue that it's because of his policies, which were not passed by the party. There's been no policy forum saying we're going to have the Online Arms Act. No policy forum said you're going to have 11-year-olds saying, I want to change my sex, and you can't tell their parents. And yet we've had a minister stand up and say that has to happen or else we're going to have kids dying in this country. A lot of this stuff, people, normal people, regular people look at it and they say, well, that's just not real. It's not, it's not hinged. And if the party had been in place, a lot of that would not have happened. And the three of you know, it was a party policy, the structure before, that there were ways for the party to push back. And Jack, you and I have been in a room when the Prime Minister has come in, when people have said from all across the country, we disagree with that, or we didn't like that. And if you're going to stay in power, you have to pay attention to that. So that's my contention, that there's no question the party is in bad, bad shape. And there's no question that this leader has taken a number of steps to make sure that he is the potentate and he doesn't have to fool around with the party or deal with the party, and much to his shame right now, because he wouldn't be as bad as he's perceived by the country. But the reason he's perceived so badly by the country is because there are, as I said, millions of Liberals out there who disagree with him, who are liberal, and will come back to the Liberal Party when the party is resuscitated by a new leader who puts into place the democratic structures that were there before, and he can't do that. So it's not dead. It's not dead. It has just been put on the back burner for a while, and that has to come back, and we'll have a new leader. And liberalism, liberty, freedom of economic possibilities, freedom of social advancement, that stuff is going to come back, and the Liberals will do it with the party.
I feel that the resolution should have not said dead, and that it should have just said on hold or pause. Yeah, because all four of you have agreed.
It's a debatable point.
Yeah.
The fact that it's dead, we're all essentially agreeing it's not dead, it's going to evolve. We're saying it's going to evolve, we see the directions of that evolution. Stupid, far more than
It has to change entirely in order to do that. It cannot be what it is. Therefore,
Yeah, that's where we disagree.
Is dead.
All right, we are going to open it up to the floor, and as we get organized for someone to get the microphone and whomever wants to muster up the courage to ask their first question, of course, I'm going to just start myself. After the decimation of the Conservatives federally, after Brian Mulroney government loss and Kim Campbell's disaster, what was born out of that, of course, was reform. And a third way, so to speak. Now, as a conservative, one of the things that we admire so much about the left is, you circle the wagons and don't point the guns inward, which is what conservatives do. You actually circle your wagons, fight it all out, and then come out united. Yes. Is there, because of the current environment in which the Liberal Party is, because I would argue it has become the Justin Trudeau party, and it's not the Liberal Party of Canada anymore, not the natural governing party has been. So is there any sense that that could happen with Liberals, that someone might look to branch off, so to speak, and say, okay, this is a mess. We can't resuscitate this. Stephen, I'll start with you.
That's a great question, Steve.
It is a great question. Okay, go ahead, Mark.
You say it's dead.
Well, I'll say this. I think Adrian's comment is absolutely quite correct. The process has always been that the Liberal Party trumps a leader. The Liberal Party trumps a candidate. The Liberal Party trumps a personality. We don't have that right now. In 2013, when this guy became the leader, he became the party, he became the structure, he became the entire brand. And we've had to, I'm sorry, but you live and die by that, and unfortunately, this is not about, and I'm not critical of Justin Trudeau, I quite like him. I think he's a good guy, but he's leading this party as if it were the Justin Trudeau party, and that's to Adrian's point. And that is because in his mind, he's saying this, if you voted Liberal, if you voted for me, if you vote for me, therefore this is, you no longer have to carry a card. Oh, fight all you want, Jack. The point of the exercise is, this has now become the Justin Trudeau party. It's not a Liberal party. It's dead.
Well, maybe Adrian has the point that the resolution should have been worded a different way, because you're saying it's dead. I'm just saying it's on life support. And that there is a better way. Liberals know there's a better way to create political action, and we've done that for years and years and years. It's been hijacked by complacent people who agree with Trudeau.
They're not complacent. They're very activist. They're not complacent at all. They're very activist.
Well, they're complacent about common sense. They're just out there with their own, quote, progressive view, a socialist view. That's not the Liberal view. That's not the Liberal Party in Ottawa. That is Justin Trudeau, and the Liberal Party will come back with, as Jack said, there are other people who will become leaders, and they're going to say, boy, in that last election, we got trounced. Why did we get trounced? Because they shut off the mic. Point to that. Did you do that, Adrian?
Someone pulled the plug on you.
They got
Like someone needs to pull
trounced
the
because
plug on the Liberal Party.
it wasn't a Liberal platform, and they're going to learn, and the Liberal Party, as I said, will rise again like the Phoenix. Howard Brown.
There's so much I want to say, but I just want to say I'm so glad we're having this discussion. And I want to thank each of you for bringing us together tonight. So big applause for each of you. I want to tell you a story. The 2021 campaign, there was a rock throwing incident in Bolton. Rocks were thrown at the Prime Minister. And I remember arriving at a door in Aurora, and this guy came to the door and he saw my Liberal button, and he came out, and I thought he was gonna, hit me. And I said, yeah, hate Trudeau, don't you? He said, I really do. And I said, why? He says, because he's an idiot. And I said, and what do you think of the other guy? He said, I don't think much more of him either. And I said, have you met any of the candidates? He said, no. And I said, well, I happen to have worked for both of the candidates. In Aurora, Oak Ridge, Richmond Hill, we had a Liberal who crossed the floor to the Conservatives and became Deputy Leader of the Conservatives, a woman named Leona Alistoff. And then we recruited a Liberal candidate named Leah Taylor-Roy. And we chatted with this guy, and I told him that I had met Leah during the 1982 Liberal leadership when David Peterson was taking on Sheila Cox. And I was helping Sheila, and I met this young woman, 21-year-old University of Toronto student, named Leah. And she told me that she was fighting with her administration in her position as the Women's Commissioner for the University of Toronto to actually suggest that the university withdraw an invitation to the University of Riyadh to bring a delegation coming in from Saudi Arabia because they didn't have women in the delegation and they didn't allow women to drive. And I said to her that day, you're going to be a member of Parliament someday.
Question, please.
Question is, I asked the guy at the door, would you meet her? She came up. She met him. We went around, it was a cul-de-sac. We came back. The guy asked for my business card. Nobody ever asked for my business card canvassing. I gave it to him. And he wrote me the next day, say, I'm so impressed, I'm thinking of voting for your candidate. The day after the election, he wrote and said he did. There is a hope. There is a hope. John Turner said it well. Get involved. If people really want to make a difference, we just go knock on doors. Yesterday, I went for 9 hours to Belleville and knocked on doors with Stephanie Bowman. It was great. The question is, why can't we get Canadians more involved?
Well, that's pretty broad. I think anyone.
But that's the question, Adrian.
I know.
Isn't that the issue?
I know that any one of the four of you can tackle that. I could tackle it too if I want. Okay, let's. Jack, do you have any thoughts on that?
You can do it one-on-one only with your candidates. The wholesale selling of the idea of who to vote for comes from the leaders, and that's why I think this notion that we have this Trudeau personality cult within the Liberal Party, and that's a bad thing, makes very little sense. In 1984, I think it was, we had John Turner's name down the side of the logo. We always do, and we always should run on our leaders. They're the one running for Prime Minister. We don't have this bifurcated notion of how you vote like the Americans do. You're voting for Prime Minister by voting for your local candidate. I was campaign chair in Ontario in 2000 and what again? Under Stephen Dion, so that was, Dion, so 2007, 2008. We recruited, and we had some limited success in that campaign, candidates who could run ahead of the party. And that's who Leah was. That's exactly who Leah was. In my own riding today, that's who Yara Sachs was. We've got an issue within the Jewish community right now that might hurt her. But we get people, and recruiting candidates is the key to that. And that's been part of the Liberal Party since the day I got active beyond stuffing envelopes when I was 14.
Mark, I think you wanted to weigh in on that.
Let me give this as a classic example. If you look at, there are two fabulous brands in the United States, the Republicans and the Democrats. Now, if you look at the Democrats as a party, they couldn't give a rat's ass about who the president or the leader of their party is. They care about the brand. So there's the National Democratic Institute and the Republican National Institute, the RNI and the DNI. And they have colleges, they talk about the process around how you build the brand and the capital around that party. We don't have that, and we haven't had that in the last 10 years. There's no capital built on the Liberal Party brand. Jack, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, you know, all we're talking about is all of the policy, all of the decisions, all of the politics is done out of the elected officials. That is not the essence of a party. So if we're talking about this in the context of, is the Liberal Party dead? Yes, it's goddamn dead. And here's why it's dead, because nothing is done at the riding association. The Prime Minister's office appoints who they're going to see run. The president of the party is appointed by the Prime Minister's office. That is not how a party operates. You, LeDrew, were the party president. Sitting over there now, I think you should be sitting on this side, but at the end of the day, when you were party president, you had some suck. And right now, the party president just says the Prime Minister's office would call and say, this is what we're going to do. There is no Liberal Party per se in Canada. It's all being run out of the Prime Minister's office. And that is the tragedy right now over the last 10 years.
Okay, we are going to go to the floor for our next question. Catherine Swift.
I don't think you guys are disagreeing with each other all that much. It reminds me of the Monty Python parrot skit, where the Liberal Party is the parrot that's not really dead, it's just resting. And that seems to be where, you know, people are coming from here. And there's a lot of questions that come to mind, but I think Trudeau, in a way, lucked in. I'm old enough, plenty old enough, to remember his father. And I was a young chickie at the time. And living in Ottawa, interesting enough, and yet his policy, Trudeau number 2's policies are very similar to number 1, very similar, massively expanding government, spending into the tank, such that we had that financial crisis in the mid-90s, and that was a hangover from Trudeau number 1. We're going to have another one with Trudeau number 2. So this isn't unprecedented, I guess I'm saying, but I wonder if Trudeau number 2 lucked into a period. It's not just in Canada where we have the wokester leaders who are expanding government, spending like crazy, doing stupid things with our public education system, and so on and so forth. This is, we've seen the mess of migrant immigration around the world. Europe's a disaster. We're heading there. And so, you know, I don't really, I'm interested in whether this is a trend that's just reversing on a broader context than just in Canada. Because I think we had the wokester stuff going on for a while. People bought into it. Then they saw the horrific results of it, and people are, your average person is seeing their kid in school being taught garbage they never wanted to see. That we're seeing the horrendous impact on our standard of living and whatnot. Now, it's not unique to Canada. So I guess I'm just interested in your perspectives on that broader trend that is not just happening in Canada. It's happening in most of the developed world right now.
Thanks, Catherine. Stephen?
I think you're right when you say it's happening in most of the Western democracies, it meaning big government, controlling government, government that in order to sustain itself has to curtail liberties. But you mentioned, you know, when I think, I would never say this on my own. You were a little chicky, you said, in Ottawa, in the Trudeau government, in the last Trudeau government. You know, from when Trudeau was beaten in '79 and then came back, the election I think was February the 18th in 1980, and beat Joe Clark, or Joe Clark beat himself. And those 4 years, from 80 to 84, the party was in very, very, very bad shape because Trudeau, one, had resuscitated the party on his own. He came back and he was a gunslinger. He gave us speeches with his thumbs in his belt, and he was the gunslinger. The party was really moribund. And it certainly was when John Turner took it over, and he spent years and years going to every little chicken fight in the prairies in Atlantic Canada because he understood the need for the party. And so the party was resuscitated. And Chrétien benefited from that because in '93, when he won, the party had a real structure and it had real life in ridings all across Canada, from coast to coast to coast. So my point is that the party wasn't dead from 80 to 84, but it was like that parrot on its back, gasping with his feet straight up, saying, "I'm done." And it came back. And so I'm saying now the party is not dead. It is, as I said, on life support, and it will come back when the big shots in Ottawa realize that they can't do it themselves, and Trudeau is about to realize that.
And I think sort of just bringing it back to the question, Dan, it was about the values and the policies that the current iteration of the Liberal Party have put forward, latching themselves on so closely to the NDP with very little daylight between the two of them. And, you know, like, let's face it, that was what Kathleen Wynne suffered in the province of Ontario. She swung so far to the left. You know, these are not traditional Liberal voters. It is the progressively social, fiscally conservative. This is not the party, and this woke stuff we talk about is very much a part of that. You may not like the term, but it's very much part of the vernacular that Justin Trudeau, for example, uses, and it's very off-putting for what clearly seems to be the majority.
It's a very good point. I'm going through my little file of pictures, and this one pops up from 1981. This is Dan McTagg at Parliament Hill working with Paul Cosgrove. The summer we appreciate the summer we had 21% interest rates in Canada. And I can tell you we still had a strong core of Canadians committed to the country. We had just come through the constitutional debate and fight. And during that period of time, unlike Justin Trudeau, Pierre Elliott Trudeau accepted from his backbenchers, Jack, dissent. Charlie Turner, the whip of the Liberal Party, voted against the Constitution. He was not chided. He was not thrown out. The difference between this Justin Trudeau and the caucuses I belong to and the one that I worked for were different.
Have you met
Caucus members were allowed to speak out. Caucus members were allowed to have discussions, agreed or disagreed. They did not have the PMO staff inside taking notes as to who was saying nice things and bad things about the Prime Minister. And you didn't have caucus members who were handpicked by the Prime Minister because they were effete and they were willing to stand up and do what the Prime Minister wanted. Most importantly, there was always that ability to find consensus that I mentioned earlier in the Liberal Party. I'm a pro-life Liberal. So I brought in the National Organ Donor Registry in 1997. So I saved the lives of Canadians abroad. I'm a live and let live guy. The Liberal Party under Justin Trudeau, not the Liberal Party itself, had a quick debate on this issue in the 2012 National Convention, and the issue was settled. I don't think issues are going to be settled. Wokesterism is now dying, and it seems to me that we're going to finally have in the Liberal Party, if it's to be anything, a debate, a discussion on every issue that takes into account seriously the concerns that all Canadians have. We may not get everybody to agree with us, but we're going to have that debate, we're going to have the discussion. It's going to be respectful, just like tonight's discussion is.
Jack, do you want to add anything?
Well, what I was trying to say, the microphone doesn't come on. You can't steal it like that. Have you met Nate Erskine-Smith? He has voted against this government more than anybody I've known in all of the 50-odd years that I've been involved. And he's what?
That would be me. That would be me.
Yeah? You actually hold the record ahead of him?
For that. He holds
More than me.
Okay. I bow to your uncontrollability. But there's plenty of that. There are confidence votes and there are other votes. And the fact is that there is the same dynamic going on today. We've had two members, neither of whom I think is about to lose their job so far, speak about the Prime Minister's future in no uncertain terms. But I think the reality is that every government, every Prime Minister exerts an awful lot of control over their caucus. You can't really govern if you don't.
I can't really see, I'm sure. I'll stand up. Yes, sir.
Hi, Christopher Cassidy. I'm a riding guy, historically, although I know Howard. And I've known Howard not since 1977, but since a misadventure with someone named Castrelli, where Jack and I came into conflict at one point over some votes that we were throwing out by the thousands. But be that as it may, I'm going to try and lend some light onto an activist perspective on the Liberal Party. So if you think back to Pearson, now I'm a Quebecer originally, je parle français, pas très bien, but here's the thing, and I won't go further because it is bad. Pearson recruited the Three Wise Men because he wanted to see the country continue, and he knew succession mattered. However, somewhere along the line, a man for whom I am not particularly supportive, named Paul Martin, decided succession was a bad idea. And what he did was terrify all his potential opponents to the point that they didn't run except for Sheila Cox, who he then tried to humiliate. Now let's be clear about this. I talked to one of those guys and said, come to my riding, and he did not, because Fontana was my member and he wouldn't cross him. And when they called me to cancel the event, because I was a provincial Liberal, I said, you're done. They said, what do you mean? I said, if you don't have the courage to cross Fontana, you'll never be leader. And Mr. Manley was not. And that moment destroyed the party's history of succession. So when we talk about the movement versus the party goes through ebbs and throws, and we have sufferings when we see moments of electoral problem. But the truth is, whether it was Mr. Martin or Mr. Trudeau, not on the same scale, these are great men who inspire us. They're all woke people at the time. We're liberals. We support these people. And then what happened was we had Mr. Dion, and then we had Mr. Ignatieff, and then we had electoral disaster. And the riding survived. The movement didn't yet exist, but the riding survived. And they were small, I know that, because I'm a riding guy. I was a riding guy after Wynne. I was a riding guy before Dalton. It's always up and down. But when we talk about the death of the Liberal Party on whatever level, the idea that this should be determined by the ebbs and flows of one leader or another seems to me to be problematic. It just doesn't work that way. The Liberal Party exists as a structure. My riding president is here. I'm an executive on another ride. It is what it is. We are smaller than we used to be. It would be greater if we were bigger. But here is my question, which I know you're waiting for, because I'm supposed to have a question.
I just turned my microphone on, too.
Yeah, I knew you would, because
Get
I'm
the
a little
question
debater.
out,
I got
please.
that sense it was trying to wrap it up. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, we as Liberals exist because we believe in this idea that we have this middle ground to build for the country. It doesn't matter who our leader is because they are transitional. And let's think back to what it was like before Mr. Trudeau. We did not exist. He seized a moment in time, similar to his father, but maybe greater, because we were nothing. And suddenly we were government. And if you knocked on those doors on day one, like I did with Peter Franciscatos, they said he's an idiot. And then we kept going and they said, I need to think about it. And then we said we would do a deficit, but not too big. And they said, we'll vote for you. And the history of the Liberal Party is allowing its leaders a platform to change the world. And the party, I think, still exists. The movement, however, well, it has died. So do you think the party still exists and will recover? Or do you think the party will fail? And if you do, I would suggest, perhaps, you should get a Tory card.
So, can I take
We're a big tent, by the way.
can I take a compliment?
Of course, please.
That was a great question. Very long-winded, but it was good. My point is this. No, it's wonderful. But if I follow your logic, what you're saying is that the Liberal Party, as a brand, ought to have a say in the aspirations of the elected officials. That does not exist today. It does not exist at all. There is no, your riding president is sitting here. I would give you $1 million right now if your riding president could call the Prime Minister today and say, I would like this to be the policy going forward for the party. Not existed at all. But I'm going to tell you, probably 20, 30, 40 years ago, that existed. Over the last 10 years, this party slowly has lost its ability to have everybody in a room like this who are like-minded to have a say. There's no say right now for the 480,000 people who have a card that says the Liberal Party, because there's no card that exists for a Liberal Party anymore. That was taken away 10 years ago when the leader of the Liberal Party was elected, said, this is not a party anymore, this is a movement. Anybody who voted Liberal is a Liberal. That's not how this works. You want to be part of a club. You want to be part of like-mindedness that says, you know what, I want to have an impact on how policy is determined. And it doesn't exist. And so your point... Parliament, members of Parliament. That's not the Liberal Party. That's my point, Howard. It's not my point.
Jack or Stephen, do you want to win? Go ahead, Jack.
I think, Mark, you've developed an incredibly strong visual problem that needs that you're wearing your rose-colored glasses about the past constantly. It was in the 1988 election when Howard had been policy chair for Ontario and I'd been secretary on that policy committee. And during the writ, the party platform arrived, and we'd done all kinds of work and resolutions through a Liberal Party convention. And I went through that thing, and I took it and I threw it in Howard's face, and and said, any resemblance between this platform and any of the stuff we've done for the last 3 years is a total coincidence. There was nothing in that platform that had anything to do with what the party had been saying. And that wasn't the first time. It was the first time that I dealt with it firsthand. And it's common ongoing. Is it a problem? Maybe. But a party, by its nature, only comes together infrequently to make decisions. And the world goes much faster than that. You need leadership to actually make decisions based on current facts. So at the time, I came to the conclusion that policy in the party is simply an organizational tool, and I got into being party organization chair instead. But every time you have a long-term prime minister, the example was already kind of given about the end of Trudeau the First. That was just the time that I was starting to get involved, moving from the riding level, coming into the party office. It was a shambles. It was a total mess. All power had devolved into the PMO, and then they scattered to the wind after we lost, and we built it up from scratch. After the Chrétien-Martin years, all power had devolved into the PMO. There was nothing left, and we built it up from scratch. And it took from when Martin lost in 06 until 2015 when we won under Trudeau. I don't want to see it happen. I think there's actually more infrastructure today that's actually in the field than there was at the time. But the fact is that whatever gets left behind is going to be built up, as you say, Chris, from the ridings up.
Dan?
I take your point. I was a riding president not once but twice, before and after being a member of Parliament. For the record, York Scarborough and Pickering Scarborough East. Also ran a few campaigns, which Jack will remember full well, for Derek Lee campaign. My earliest one was Paul Cosgrove, 1980, and of course the last one with Alvin Curling provincially. So federally and provincially. My biggest concern, though, unlike those times, we knew our riding associations, our executives had a grassroots element to it, a very strong one. And it was very effective, whether it was at an organizational level or at a policy level. Maybe Howard got me onto this back in 1978, 79, but it meant something when we were youngsters in the ONL way back when, and I was trying to run for secretary, but my French wasn't that great. À ce temps-là, je n'étais pas aussi français que je suis aujourd'hui. And I'm not impressing you with that, but I'm not from Montreal, but it shows you that bilingualism actually worked. And I guess my bigger concern now is something that has been addressed, but I want us to give thought to it. The base of support of the Liberal Party seems to be, to a large extent, on what people can get out of it. And I don't just mean the political kick of, hey, I like them, it's the Prime Minister, let's meet him. I'm very, very worried that a party that has become reliant on grift, on money, on taxpayers' money, is the only way in which you get people to vote for you, much less support you at the organization level. We had in your time, my time, we had a committed group of people who believed in the party because the party was pragmatic, it was open. I believe we've lost that, and for that reason, I believe the party is on a collision course with the destiny that says there is no future for the Liberal Party, unless there's a change.
Thank you. We have the opportunity for just a couple more questions, so yes, sir.
Hi, Andrew Perez. So mine is more of a comment, which I invite panelists to react to. I really appreciate the perspective, and I agree with a lot of it. I've said a lot of these things on Stephen's show. I guess my overall reaction to this debate is that, if I may be so bold, in a sense it's a bit myopic, because the issues we're discussing are much broader than the Liberal Party. The main one being that parties are now very leader-centric across the board. Just to give some examples, Doug Ford in Ontario, he has traditional Liberal and New Democrats voting for him, and his opposition are in complete squalor. Quebec, the CAQ, a new party, again, it's a François Legault party, which is now on the downward spiral, but again, BC, the BC United Party no longer exists. In the US, the Republican Party is a shell of what it once was. So I think that, and this is the bitter truth, I believe, we're looking at an era of leader-centric parties. And I believe we're having this debate because Trudeau's so unpopular. If Trudeau was still popular today, we wouldn't be having this debate. So probably the next iteration of the Liberal Party will probably be somewhat leader-centric. Hopefully that leader is able to have a more sustainable offering. But I think these are broader questions. Also, people aren't liberals anymore. And my generation, I ask very educated, learned people in my network, who's your MP? They don't know. These are people with sometimes PhDs and Masters of Laws. They don't know who their MP is. People don't vote. Like, I believe in the importance of the right. I believe all that. I've grown up that way. But that's not how the future generations, at least in the last 10 years, that's not how they live. That's not how they consume information. It's leader-centric. So I guess curious to hear how the panel reacts. I really respect the experience, and I know that's how it was for years, but I don't think we're returning to that golden era where you got involved in your riding association and you moved up the ladder. I think the future is going to be very different.
Mark, I think it's such an important point. I think that almost romantic notion of being part of that grassroots, going and knocking on the doors. I mean, that's still such a fundamental part of it, but there's just not that broad infrastructure anymore. And it doesn't matter which party it is.
Well, and I know Andrew, I think he's a great voice in Canada, and you and I have been in publications in Canada together, and I think we've been in violent agreement on what we're talking about and what you've said. So I think that I'm just going to go out on a limb and say Andrew supports us on this side. But to the comments that were made earlier on too, apropos to yours, if you look at this in the context of a global issue, in the United Kingdom, for example, the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom still has a large say as a party in who becomes the leader of that party. And you've seen that, and that still happens. We do a lot of work, my company, in Mexico. I find this is a fascinating dynamic. There are three parties. There's a PRI, the PNI, and a party called Morena, which is really, in English, it stands for the Revolutionary Movement. And in the last 6 years, the revolutionary movement has been the purview of a fellow by the name of Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, AMLO they call him. When he started his party in 2012, because he said, Vicente Fox, who was the head of PRI, said, "You can't run because you're an idiot," he said to AMLO. AMLO said, "I'm starting my own party." If you look at how Morena now acts as a party, in order to be a candidate in that party, you must commit and submit to a party process on how you become a candidate. So you have to do X number of hours in didactic party politics in your party. And then you have to commit and submit to a process on how you act as a candidate. And that entitles you to be in the process to get a nomination. That's how political parties have an influence. We don't see that. We don't see party presidents in Canada right now having a say in the Liberal Party on candidates, because if I'm my riding is Mississauga Lakeshore, there wasn't even a nomination process for the by-election. The Prime Minister appointed Charles Sousa. Look at what's happened in La Salle-Mar. They said, no, we're going to appoint this person. That's how the party abrogates its responsibility or gives away its responsibility to the elected officials. And that is not the sign of a healthy party. That's my point. To your point, Andrew, I think there's a lot of that that's happening internationally as well.
It is happening internationally, if I can have a minute, Madam Chair. And Andrew, you're saying that internationally there are so many countries, look at Hungary, what's going on, where we're having leaders who are virtual dictators. And that's the way.
I'd say appointing the candidate, I agree that's wrong, but that's an inside story.
But that, yeah, I think you're right. That is part of the party, but when you're dealing with a leader, a prime minister, a president, and that leader is allowed to do exactly what he or she wants without any boundaries, without any pushback, that's what's going on now in Canada, which is why the government's so unpopular. There's no pushback whatsoever. Everybody, all the MPs and the Liberal MPs are afraid to say anything to the Prime Minister. They could to his dad, but not to him. So then my point is, the party is not in existence right now because the executive, the Prime Minister has to go to the executive and go through the gauntlet. I've seen this fellow and the party executive take on the Minister of Justice on an issue the Minister of Justice was proposing, and this guy took him on to task. And afterwards, they had a discussion about it. And you're not going to deny that. But that was important for this. You're damn right. It was important for the Minister of Justice, the Attorney General of Canada, to meet with the party executive and hear it. And if Trudeau did that and the party was there hearing it, he would not be the arrogant guy running the country poorly than he would now. So I'm saying, the party's not there right now. There's no question about it. He has destroyed it. But it's going to come back because future leaders realize that if they're going to have any popularity, if they're going to have any significance and deal properly with their office, there is going to be a party that's going to have some influence on what he or she decides.
I'm just going to give Dan and then Jack a quick response on this, and then we'll take one more question.
Chomping at the bit, saying that was in the days when the party was actually still alive. But I think Andre's point is a valid one. There has been in the past, of course, this belief that people will obviously vote based on who the leader is. We know this. Then, to some extent, the party, and then the candidate. And it's necessarily in that order. Jack, Howard, others will confirm this has always been the case. What is different now, and speaking to Mark's point, I believe, is that, and it's your point as well, the leader has become everything. And that's why I think it may not be just for the Liberal Party. There may be other parties as well that may find the same fate. Their irrelevance is that people have invested so much stock into who the leader is. Which I said at the beginning, you know, the socks, the selfies, the sobbing is far more important to people in some respects and to a large constituency of people than the actual policies, what the party represents. The difficulty is that it disengages people from the polity, the country that they call their own. The democracy, the participation in that democracy isn't for most of us in this room just a matter of exercising your right to vote for those who do. It's far more than that. And I think the disappointment, the loss here, is that the party of the centre, that used to be the vehicle by which voices could be heard, parliamentarians, not a lawyer, could pass changes to the criminal code because they were good ideas. Those things may very well be lost. And with it, sadly, I believe that's because the most important vehicle in this country was the Liberal Party. That's why I believe today it is effectively dead.
Jack, do you want to add just one last comment, and then we're going to take one last
Yeah,
question.
I want to address the subject that Andrew and Margaret touched on nominations, because I know that history awfully well. Appointments became a thing in the Liberal Party outside of Quebec only in 1992 under Jean Chrétien. It was used, it's always been used with quite a bit of restraint. In 93, we got people like Jean Augustine and Art Eggleton out of that process, and several others of great quality. It's always been used with restraint. When we used it, when we brought it in provincially under McGuinty, we built in. You can only do it 5 ridings in an entire election. I think it's a good thing that the feds ought to look at. First campaign meeting of the National Campaign Committee under Justin Trudeau. He said, and I quote, "I will never appoint a candidate." And I turned to him and said, because people seem to think you can't challenge Justin Trudeau, I certainly did it then, and I've raised issues since. I said, please don't say that ever again. It can be something as simple as the candidate having a heart attack the day before nomination day, and you're going to need to do it. It's there, and it has value, and it brings in good people. Trudeau appointed nobody in the 2015 election. He appointed nobody in the 2019 election. He made his first appointment in a pair of by-elections in the summer of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, of Yara Sachs and Marcy Ian. As far as I know, he made no appointments in 21 for that election. By-elections, for some reason, have evolved into something, and I think that might be something to talk about, but it's also, if you don't, and there's an aspiring riding president, they're going to control the group because you don't have a sufficient recruiting period. And I can tell you, because I live in Yara Sachs's riding, we had really good people running, but we got a spectacular person because he was prepared to take that step.
One last question, and then each of them are going to have...
Yes, hi. Brad Harness from Burlington. It's been a great discussion and debate tonight. I'm very happy we're all able to get together tonight. One thing I want to point out is when I think about future of the Liberal Party federally, go back to its origins in the mid-1800s in Ontario. It was pro-democracy, pro-business. That was it. The progressive stuff was added on in a lot more recent years. And while that's certainly produced some good results, I think most Canadians would agree what we really were looking to achieve was to see all Canadians, all genders, all ages, all racial groups, all religions, treated equally under the law in all circumstances, in the employment situation and everything else. We've got that. Anything beyond that can really only be explained as slice and dice politics in urban areas, especially Toronto. And if you go outside of Toronto, those policies are completely unacceptable in recent years. And were members of Parliament able to vote in free votes on these policies would never have seen the light of day. And I have good extended business and family connections in BC and Alberta and in Quebec and in Nova Scotia and deeply in Ontario. This is a very widespread feeling. And unless the Liberal Party can get over that concept of tightly controlling MPs and not allowing the MPs to properly represent their ridings, I don't see any reason why anybody would want to vote in a Liberal member of Parliament. I have done door-to-dooring this spring, and my background is in journalism, by the way, and a military career prior to that, and people talk. People will gladly tell you what they think, and everything we've said here tonight is exactly what they're saying at the door, and unless there's a really major change, no, they're not voting Liberal.
Thank you for your service. Because I'm in charge here, I have decided there are more questions on this floor, so all four of these guys are going to forego their 2 minutes each on a conclusion, so we're going to get more questions in. Mark, do you want to address anything in that regard? Either?
Real short.
Jack?
Typical.
Yeah, right. There's never been a government, to my knowledge, that has not enforced caucus discipline. It doesn't matter what party it is. This isn't a Liberal thing. This was an NDP thing under Bob Rae, big time. That's the only NDP government I have sufficient knowledge of. And it was certainly the way things were done under Mulroney and under Harper. It's not a party thing. It's the way the Westminster system works, with variations as to how much dissent. Apparently Dan got away with a lot more than I realized.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Richard Bruton. I've been listening to this with great interest. I had suspicions that this is exactly what was happening, because I do believe the riding associations are of enormous importance. If somebody is selected within the riding association, it typically goes through that voting process, and the person has to be supported by a number of signatories to the person, and so that eventually everyone in that riding association actually wants to go out there and knock on doors to actually get that person elected. That person means something to them. It's somebody that lives in the neighborhood. It's somebody that they've probably become acquainted with for quite a while for service within the riding association, right? And the policy making, obviously, which I've seen happening, in which there are these policy reunions of all the members from the riding associations, and proposals are put through, which sort of the group everyone can vote on the most prioritize what the party should do going forward. I think that's very important because it makes everyone feel involved in the decision-making process. So my point being, and maybe this is not the question, is that when a party like the Liberal Party, right, in Canada, makes the membership tolerates this kind of behavior from a Prime Minister, isn't it by estoppel that they are actually agreeing with it? And actually, when I look at Canada, and I've traveled the world quite extensively, I've lived under various types of regimes, and I look at Canada economically, and I think here is one of the second largest country in the world. We are probably the richest country in the world naturally. We have one big problem. We have a very small population with very little capital to make this country fully develop to the extent that it can. So we depend immensely on foreign investment, and we know our oil industry was very much started by the Americans because we, on Bay Street, didn't want to exactly invest in it. But then comes a prime minister like Trudeau Sr. and then Trudeau Jr. But Trudeau, so when I remember the early 1990s, when I came to live in Canada, we had succeeded in destroying our industry in the eastern part of Canada, and our people moved over to the oil and gas industry where they were surviving at better wages, and economically Canada didn't suffer so much as a result. But then comes Trudeau Jr., and like his father, tries to destroy the oil and gas industry in Canada. Now, for the last 20 or something years, our Canadian dollar relative to the US dollar, obviously so dependent on the oil price, but nevertheless has actually been getting weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. Now, in one of the richest countries in the world, our inflation is so ridiculously high that if you bought a cottage in 1960s, now you have it for $1 million, you still have that same cottage. You sell it, you're subject to taxation at 50% up to, well, let's say, $250,000, and therefore even more. So you're left with, once you've sold the cottage and you wanted to buy the cottage next door because it's also $1 million cottage, you find out that you might just have $300,000 left in your pocket. Come on. The person has not become any richer. It's bad governance that's actually caused all of this. Now, my question is, if there's a question to be asked, why does a Liberal Party or any party deserve to be elected in Canada that cannot fix this mess when we live in one of the richest countries in the world?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I would add to that, how do you let the current government that in many cases created the mess try to fix it? And I think Canadians are prepared to reject that. But Mark?
Well, that is a great question. That's a great question. That's a great question. Your comments are spectacular. But let's just look at how you would go about resolving that issue. I'm just going to throw this out there. And maybe, Jack, you're going to respond, but I hope you do. If you've got riding associations, if you've got a party machine that has 400, 500, 600,000 people in this country who can say, I have the ability to put forward my opinions, my experience, my suggestions, etc., and they're listened to, and much like you, because I thought they were quite eloquent what you said, they might have some traction. That does not exist right now. Everything's done from a very small group of people who sit in what they used to call the Langerman block. That's where all the decisions are made, by a group of people who surround themselves with the person with whom they elected, for all intents and purposes, the leader of the party, the leader of the government, and nobody else matters. That means that the party, the machine, the presidents of riding associations matter nothing. And so all of those voices are silent, they're dead. That's the problem that we have today. And I'm going to go one more point. I like what you said, Jack, about, this prime minister didn't appoint this person, didn't appoint that person, didn't. But if you look at since 2015 to today, they were very, very clear in this particular party right now about who they wanted as their candidates and made that happen.
Stephen or Jack? Well, you left them speechless, Mark. That was impressive.
No, I think that, so you have put your finger on the malaise in Canada, one of the real problems in Canada. And when I extrapolate from what you said, and I was thinking, okay, so why do we have that problem? I mean, we have so many riches in Canada. Why do we have that problem? And as Mark said, we have 6 people in the PMO who meet every morning, read the papers, and say, okay, this is how we're going to get reelected. And this is the group we're going to appeal to. Damn the policies. We don't care about those policies. This is how we're going to do it. And that is why, you can say, well, there is some universality of opinion here tonight, because, you know what, I don't think anybody agrees, well, maybe Jack, that we couldn't do better if there was a stronger party. If there was a party where you were sitting there, as I said before, giving the AG of Canada crap over what he was doing, with 50 people from around the country sitting there listening, and you eventually won. I've done that with prime ministers. And there is no kickback. There is no party apparatus right now in order for riding presidents to meet, and for everybody in the party, the activists, to get together and do something about it. Again, Madam Chair, the resolution tonight perhaps it should have been reworded, because the party is non-existent as it was. Is it dead? No. Because unless the Liberal Party does not want to win another election ever, it's got to bring back the institution of the Liberal Party of Canada with a constitution that counted and with committees and with input so that the elected honchos in Ottawa can't go on their merry way flying all over the country with their jets to every worm pick to try to get the votes and leave ordinary Canadians behind.
Dan is going to make one last comment on this, and then we'll have another question.
I have spent most of my career post-politics dealing with energy affordability. I have dealt significantly with the issue of how Canada has created a missed opportunity, and it was a political decision. It was not a decision that most Canadians understood. So I agree with you on your point on energy. The difficulty is that in not having the kind of resources, the funds, the revenues that would have come from building pipelines, building out our natural resources sector, and I'm not just talking about oil and gas, but also mining, forestry, the difficulties, the lawfare, the opposition, understandable in the context of laws, but I think there's overkill, and there's a sense that what we've done is despoiled, not just for this generation, but for generations to come, the ability to make the country financially viable again. I served as a member of Parliament in the 1990s when both Chrétien and Martin worked hard, diligently, and the provinces were on side, to a large extent, with seeing cuts to social programs. We've lost that as well. In the process, I believe this is one more reason why it's another nail in the coffin of the future of the Liberal Party.
Hello, Dalton Albrecht from Oakville, Ontario. As a lapsed Liberal who worked on Jim Peterson's federal campaign and David Peterson's provincial campaigns, and I guess a small L Liberal, my question is very simple, maybe for the right side as I'm facing. Why would I even consider voting for the current Liberal Party? It just doesn't make sense to me at all. It's not relevant to what my past experience has been.
That's a good question. What's the why would you vote for this current iteration of Liberals?
Maybe I should simplify the question. As a lapsed Liberal, maybe that tells you something, why would I even consider voting for the current Liberal Party? I think it is dead, so I think the left side of who I'm facing has won the debate, but why would I even consider at all voting for the Liberal Party now? It's not the Liberal Party of the past in any way, in any form, and nothing like the former Liberal Party leaders.
I guess it depends on your point of view. If you don't agree with the things that this party's achieved, then yeah, I can understand why you might not vote for it. But I put together a little list because I wouldn't remember everything. The Canada Child Benefit, affordable daycare, so both parents can go to work together or in different places. Assault weapon bans. You can object to the price on carbon, and I expect the gentleman who spoke before about energy is certainly opposed to the notion, but at least it's a party that recognizes that climate change is a problem. We don't hear that out of the Conservatives. We get denial. You talk about pharmacare. Yes, NDP deal, but it's something that Eric Hoskins was appointed by Trudeau to work on before the NDP showed up, saying this was part of a condition. Free trade agreements. Every G7 country are now in place. We're the only G7 country that has that, with all of the others, and with Ukraine. Guess who voted against?
Stephen, I think that, do you want to, pretty much, either of you? I mean, I think we know the answer there. I think the whole overall point is that this isn't the type of Liberal Party that you would have supported in the past anyway.
Because this is not a Liberal Party.
What do you call it then if it's not the Liberal Party?
This is not a Liberal Party. This is a part, like, and anybody in here who said I support the Liberal Party, and I've been a Liberal all my life. I've never voted anything but Liberal. I'm having a very difficult time with a party that I support that says I've got to put myself in the position to keep power by supporting what Jagmeet Singh. I never would have voted NDP ever, and I can't accept that Jagmeet Singh is really in control of my party right now. This is not the Liberal Party.
It doesn't matter that the supply confidence thing is torn up. It doesn't matter. That whole thing, because damage is done, I think, is really the point. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Roxana. I'm a friend of Mr. Stephen LeDrew for many years. He had helped me with my career as a singer back in the day. I'm not in politics at all, but I am interested to learn. I came to Canada in 1988 from Iran, and the reason we came to Canada was because of the freedom, because of the opportunities we could have in this country that they offered to us, and I'm very grateful to be in Canada. I don't even know if this question that I'm going to ask is relevant to you guys, because you're a bunch of intelligent people here with political background, and I'm not. I'm just a regular person. My question is, would freedom of speech ever come back again? Because now in these days, saying any word, I don't know what liberal means anymore. Can we say anything without offending anyone anymore? About cultural or even jokes, like for example, Friends, the show Friends, when we watched it, if they made such thing right now, they'll be in trouble. Or Golden Girls, or any of those shows. I'm into entertainment, as you know. So, like, is this ever going to come back again for me to say I don't like a certain group of people, or it's my opinion? If it's liberal, or if this Canada is about freedom, is that ever going to come back again? That's my question.
That's a great question. It's such a great question, Stephen, because, you know, part of what you brought up in terms of the so-called Online Harms Act really does allow a handful of bureaucrats to decide what she can and cannot say, what's acceptable or not.
And you, as the editor-in-chief of the Toronto Sun, know that very well.
I mean, I might as well be going to jail at this point.
Well, and certain things that certain guests say on my show would put me in jail. So to answer your question directly, I think you will be able to express yourself, but it's going to take a little bit more work, because the world and Canada is becoming very autocratic and even more so politically correct. And to have a discussion of views, of issues, and to allow someone else to say something, as was said tonight here in this room many times, is very difficult right now. I know people who wanted to come here tonight, and they told me it was being taped, and they didn't want the Prime Minister's office to hear or see what they may have said that somebody up there could disagree with. Now that is shameful. And that is not Canada, and that will change.
And I just want to add to that, because I too got a lot of comments from people who said, what are you doing? And the comment that came out was, it's cuckoo to even have this debate. But to your point, and I think your point's well taken, we're now at a stage where everybody has a fact or an opinion, and they throw them on the table, and we debate on whose ever fact or opinion matters more than the other fact or opinion. You know, when we talk about these things, it's really important that you have a considered opinion. It's really important that you understand what you're saying, and so you don't look like a moron like they did last night on TV when they're talking about eating dogs and cats. So these are the kinds of, I just think it's important that when you're in these kinds of debates, that your opinion is considered, that your facts are considered, and they're experiential. And that's where I think, in a way, Adrian, you chose 4 good debaters, because we've all had great experience at this party. And to your point, I think you can't say you got to be so honest that you should be able to say exactly what you want, because sometimes saying exactly what you want isn't necessarily the right and appropriate thing to do, which comes from having considered opinions and good experience. So I think that's where we're at, and it's all evolving, but we're at the point right now where I think as human beings, and it's not about being a liberal or a conservative or a socialist. At the end of the day, it means that you've got to be mindful of, you're a new Canadian. This whole country was built on new Canadians. And I think we have to be mindful of that diversity and what it means here. But we also have to take into consideration sometimes what could trigger somebody based on the way you say things. So I think we're all learned over the last little while on how you say things, because oftentimes that has impact on people.
Okay, I have time for the last question, and then you guys, the bar is open. So yes, sir, you make it a good one.
Thank you, John Fraser. I live here in Toronto. I'm going to give a bit of a preamble, a very short preamble. I have been a Liberal for 23 years, or sorry, a Conservative for 23 years. Thanks to Brian Mulroney, my locker mate at the Montreal Athletic Association, in chats with him and his wrinkly body in the steam room. But I was born a Liberal. By the time I was born, I had 16 years of Liberal history behind me. My father was roommate of Paul Martin Jr. In the hospital when they had polio together for 5 months. I grew up with the Martins, junior and senior. I did odd jobs for the Martins. I carried the Liberal dirty laundry and helped clean it when I worked for Mr. and Mrs. Martin. And I've seen the evolution of politics in Canada through the years, and it's really disturbing to me. I consider myself pro-choice, but not in the sense that Dan was talking about earlier. I believe in choice in politics, and I don't see choice today. I really don't. The choice is gone. Politics has become so polarized. How do we return choice between the political parties in Canada today? Because I don't feel, as I once was a Liberal when I grew up, and I voted Liberal earlier, that I have a choice to return to the Liberal Party today.
Let's have all four of you respond quickly, and then that will be our conclusion. So Stephen, let's start with you.
You won't have a choice until the Liberal Party comes back, and it will, and then you will.
Jack?
I think you've got a choice. I think the choice is very clear in so many ways. The Liberal Party, as it exists today, is a more progressive party than the party of Lester Pearson. I don't have a problem with that. Well, we're going to disagree then. You have a choice between this and Pierre Poilievre's approach to things. You may not want what the Liberal Party is offering, and that's what democracy is about. But that doesn't mean you don't have a choice. If you want to choose the Conservatives, by all means do. If neither one is offering you a choice that you like, maybe find somebody who can put together a new party a little bit better than Max Bernier can, and pursue that.
Dan?
I think the idea of eclipsing of choice, which is what the Liberal Party has now done under this particular leader, leaves very few people with very few alternatives. And I think in that regard, Jack is correct. But I do not believe that choice going forward after this next federal election, there's no money to buy support, there's no money to purchase opinion leaders, when there is no issues in which to divide Canadians, I believe that this is a sign that there will very soon be, after that next federal election, a move to either change the Liberal Party, in the sense that it unites with the NDP, or an all-new Together party comes to the fore. The Liberal Party, as we know it, has changed. The Liberal Party, as I knew it, has died, and it continues to remain where it is in the cemetery.
Mark, you get the last word, sir.
I don't want to have the last word, but I think your question is probably the most pithy of all tonight. We're at a very interesting crossroads in politics in this country. It's performative right now. It's in a lot of ways, it's not really liberal. Like we've got a government that's for all intents and purposes progressive as hell, and that's good in some ways, but bad in other ways. But I want to go down this path. In order for us to be successful as a Liberal Party that has a brand that people would buy into, we have to make sure that we stick to where Canadians are. This party has been government in this country for more years than any other political party in this country. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is guys like him, guys like Mackenzie King, guys like Lester Pearson, guys like Louis Saint-Laurent, guys like John Turner, guys like Jean Chrétien, guys like Paul Martin have stuck to the center. That's where Canadians are. And if we stay in the center and we act like we're in the center, riding associations have the right and appropriate opportunity to make their voices heard so that policy is engendered at the riding association level, then that's going to attract people and they will do what Jack says and go out and vote for this party time and time again.
Thank you.
So that's it for tonight, and it's been over an hour and a half of very good listeners, very good questions, and thank you for coming. And Adrian Batra, tank commander, she did it. And so thank you very much, Adrian. And for the other three speakers here on the podium, thank you very much, and thanks for attending. And it's important. Or no, you know what? I think it's quite clear.
Stephen.
I think it's clear.
I think it's quite clear. But we'll be around having a drink. Yes, Andre?
Stephen, as you know, this was broadcast live on YouTube. Throughout the broadcast, we were running a poll to the viewers asking whether or not the Liberal Party is dead.
Oh, okay.
We had 308 people vote in the poll. It was 93% saying the Liberal Party is dead to 6% who said it is not.
Well, you know what? And that's not because Jack Siegel did not do a good job. He did a great job, and which is why he's a terrific lawyer. And you know what? There's always tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.